if somebody I admired said they liked something,
Yeah.
I wouldn't look at it through my eyes. I try and see it through their eyes.
Yeah.
What do they like about this?
Yeah.
What am I missing here?
Yep.
And not enough people do that. They think they're right. And that stops them from learning. Instead of going, what if I'm wrong here?
On this week's episode of You Are a Storyteller, we conclude our two-part series where Brian McDonald and Jesse Bryan discuss Brian's influences and the importance of mentorship.
The next guy, I'm really excited to talk about this because I'd love to hear you kind of crystallize some of this stuff for me. You were like a Rod Serling fanatic.
I am.
You have, in your office, you have like a giant, it's Billy Wilder, it's Rod Serling, and it's Schindler's List.
Yeah.
But the Rod one is like by your desk, and it's huge.
Massive.
Yeah. And you love Rod Serling. Like,
I do.
why? How did you learn about that there was a guy named Rod Serling?
I don't know. I can tell you this. So, Planet of the Apes, that film was a big influence on me. One of the biggest influences on me as a movie. That first Planet of the Apes movie was like, if it was on TV, I was watching it. That's all there was to it. There's no two ways about it. I never missed it. I learned a ton from it. It's one of the first scripts if I could get, when I got a hold of it, I was like, I read it incessantly. But I didn't know when I was watching Planet of the Apes that there was such a guy as Rod Serling. I didn't know that yet.
It was a movie. You weren't going, oh, there's a person behind this? Didn't your dad like that movie too?
My dad loved Planet of the Apes. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did. I remember him talking about that movie. Yeah. They smoke. That was his big thing. They smoke cigars. He was amazed. And it's hard for people to understand now, but those effects were amazing to people at that moment. Amazing. It was amazing. I don't know. We're so used to seeing effects now.
Yeah.
We can't really quite, but it was amazing to people. And I remember that. I was really young when the first movie came out. I think I saw the third one in the theater. I always remembered it was the first one, but when I think about it, I go, no, I think I saw the third one in the theater. But the third one is not as good.
Yeah, as the first one.
As
Sure.
the first
yeah.
one. The first one's amazing.
So
And,
that made an imprint on you. But when did you
man.
learn about this dude, Rod Serling?
then the Twilight Zone was not in reruns, or at least I didn't see it until I was a little older. So I was probably 11 or 12 or something like that when the Twilight Zone started being rerun, where I could see it.
Yeah.
Or pay attention to it or whatever, but that's when I started watching it. It's like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Talk about the coolest dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like in the Twilight Zones, when he shows up and he's standing there, you're like, that's the coolest dude. And his voice,
He's the coolest guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which nobody thought at the time in real life, that he was the coolest guy. He's like, it's weird. He thought it was weird that people thought he was so cool and that he was tall because he was a pretty short guy. But he is cool. But they didn't want him to host it or be they tried they were like, maybe Orson Welles or, they didn't think he was the guy for it. They thought it was laughable. Really, Rod? But yeah, you look at him now, you go, he's the smooth.
How are you going to find a better, he's the coolest guy.
Yeah, always smoking.
Yeah,
which probably killed him, but,
yeah, sure, yeah.
But it looks cool.
Yeah, he's the coolest looking dude.
So then.
So 11 or 12,
something like
Twilight
that.
Zone.
And then I became obsessed with that show.
Why?
I think initially it had a lot to do with the endings, the twist endings, because that's something that when you're learning how to write is easy to see.
Huh.
Right? So that's the first thing I could see that I noticed.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Would you call those twist endings?
No, but that's...
Oh, got it. Yeah, I got what you're saying. I was like, I don't... Yeah.
No. They're not twist endings, but it's kind of known for that.
Yeah.
In the same
like
way.
Planet of the Apes.
Right.
Twist endings like, no, it's the right ending. Yeah.
Right. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure.
Surprise ending
Yeah, right.
in some way. Sometimes they're not surprises, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first thing I noticed. And so that was the first thing I learned how to imitate as a writer. Mm-hmm. Like, I can do that. But I'm not impressed with it anymore.
Yeah.
It was the first thing I learned how to do, so I'm not impressed.
Right.
It's a trick.
Yeah.
So people do it, but they're not Rod Serling. When other people do it, they're not Rod Serling. The reason it worked when Rod Serling did it is because he always had a point, and that was always the sort of button on the point he had been making the whole time.
Yep.
Right? And so his twist endings or surprise endings work better than most because there's more going on there than the trick.
Yep.
Which is why you can rewatch them. If you've seen
It's like
them,
the Glasses episode. What's that called?
That one's called Time Enough at Last.
Yeah, guess you could say it's it's like, well, at the end you're like, no, but that's such a killer, perfect ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why was the Twilight Zone important to him?
Because he wanted to talk about real things. He had been working in live television drama, same as Reginald Rose, who did 12 Angry Men, and Patty Chayefsky, who did Marty, and he had been working in live TV, and they liked talking about real things. Certainly Reginald Rose and Rod Serling did, like real political things.
Yeah, 12 Angry Men's no joke.
It is not a joke. It is not a joke.
Imagine trying to write that.
I don't even know how.
Yeah.
12 Angry Men. 12 Angry Men is amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
he was of that time.
yeah, he's of that time and of that group. They all
GIs
knew each
came
other.
back,
Yeah.
right?
So, so he wanted to write, like in 55, there was a very famous the lynching of Emmett Till, and it became a big story, and Rod Serling wanted to write about it, but he wasn't really allowed to because we're upset the Southern market, and and he just found he couldn't talk about real things. And so he thought that if he did the Twilight Zone, he could talk about real things but sort of disguise them. And so the Twilight Zone was a way for him to talk about things he thought were important to talk about in a way that would get past all of the censorship.
So smart.
It's very smart. Yeah, very smart. So,
And that he cared that much.
yeah,
It wasn't, I got an idea for a hit show. It was, no, I want to find a way to be able to talk about the things I want to talk about.
yeah,
And it also happened to make for a killer show.
yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, that still we talk about.
Well, you can't. What's interesting is that every now and then somebody will come along and somebody will say that person's the new Rod Serling or this is the new Twilight Zone. And it's never true. And the reason it's never true is because when something new happens, people don't compare it to other things. Right? So somebody comes along and they say, they're the next Beatles. No, they're not.
Right.
They never are.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to be the first whoever they are.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So the next Twilight Zone, no, it's not. You wouldn't care. You wouldn't use the Twilight Zone as a marker. You would be like, it's its own thing.
Sure. And so when did you start to go, this is special? Like, this guy, is in kind of a different league? Just because I know out of all, you have a lot of people that you respect, but like Rod is such a big deal. Like, what did you learn from him that set you kind of on this journey?
Well, yeah, he taught me how to write. So
In what way?
what I learned from watching him over and studying him was that everything mattered and to have a point. So when I talk about armature or any of that stuff I learned from watching his work and studying his work, that he had a point and everything in the story was there to help make that point.
Yep.
To help dramatize that point, that idea.
Everything matters.
Everything matters. And that I learned, I was young when I was learning it, so it was sort of instinctual. I learned it consciously later from other things, but I learned it subconsciously. Like, I didn't even know I was good at that stuff. I was writing with somebody, and they said, well, you're really good at theme and how themes work. And I had no idea I was good at that. Somebody else told me I was good at it.
But you were
I had internalized it.
so obsessed with his stuff, it obviously made a huge impact.
It made a huge impact. And then there were other people like Larry Gelbart who created MASH for TV.
Yeah.
That he was the first guy I went, oh, you don't have to have a twist ending. You can still have a good story.
Right.
Right. And so I learned that from Larry Gelbart and the people who wrote MASH.
Yeah, MASH is insane.
MASH is amazing. MASH is amazing. People dismiss it now because there's a laugh track on it. And I have a whole theory about laugh tracks on it. But that was the time that it was made and all of that. But if you took that laugh track out, it'd be better than any show that you could see now.
Oh, I told you that was a show that my grandma, when I was a kid, whenever bedtime was, 8 o'clock, MASH came on. Whatever nights came on, she would let me stay up and watch MASH with her.
Yeah.
And even as a kid, I remember that show just being like, this is really good.
It's a good show.
And I was like, you know what I mean? It's But with Rod, like, was there anything that crystallized for you? Any other things he taught you, writing or as a person or even life that?
He was one of those people who seemed to care about people. Now, somebody wrote a review. They hadn't watched. They started watching Twilight Zone, and they got like, that guy really didn't like people or something about Rod Serling, which isn't true and doesn't appear to be true to me, and wasn't true of him. I think he liked people a lot. I think he was disappointed in humanity. Right. And I think disappointment comes from knowing you can do better. You can do better than this, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think he because he thought we could be better, he held us to a high standard, and so he can be judgmental. But I think he loved individual people and loved what could be good about people, and he wrote about that. He wrote stuff that shows that. And even the stuff that's, you know what, he didn't usually write about how bad humanity was. He would show you what it was to be a bad human being. Don't be this guy.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Don't be this guy. Often he would have a counterpoint. So there would be somebody who was not that guy who would be like, dude, really, don't be that guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So it wasn't like, I think now they just have the bad guy.
Right.
And there's no counterpoint.
Yeah.
You know? But he would often, more times than not, there would be a counterpoint, right? So you'd have the astronauts who, in the middle of the desert,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And one guy was a jerk, right?
Yeah.
You know? And everybody's like, you're a jerk.
Yeah. Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think he was just always saying, don't be this guy, or be this better version. Be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think that's the way he lived his life, and that's the way he felt about things. And I don't know exactly where that came from in his life. But he seemed to be a really fair-minded human being who, he hated prejudice. He hated it. And, he really hated it. And it wasn't like the fashion or it's
Yeah,
cool
no. It would have been a very unpopular time.
Yeah.
The fact that Rod Serling was as outspoken as he was is kind of crazy.
Yeah, he really was.
He gave that speech at like Berkeley or UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
Man, he didn't hold back on anything.
No, he didn't hold back on things. He
seemed very like a very principled person.
I believe
And he had the
that.
work to back it up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I think he was. I think that something. I don't know who he was before World War II. I think he was a good dude before. I don't think the war made him a good dude, but I think the war gave him a sense of responsibility. And I think he came back after having seen the worst of humanity and what we could be, wanting to say, again, that we could be better, that we could do better. And so he often tried to show us the best of what we could be, or sometimes warn us. I think.
consequences.
Yeah, I think that Planet of the Apes is a really great warning, right? Where he talks about how that our intelligence and our idiocy walk hand in hand, right? He talks about, Dr. Zayas has a line, something like that, where how can we be so smart and so stupid at the same time? How can we be so self-destructive? How can we, you know, like, we're smart, why are we doing this? You know, always asking, how can we be both these things? How can we destroy the planet and be these really great, you know, smart animals?
Yeah. So much potential.
Yeah. So I see that. I see just a lot of humanity in his work. And the fact that Stuart Stern liked him, that makes him.
Yeah.
But Stuart, they were very similar, I think. I think Stuart was a little bit more, wore his heart on his sleeve in a different way.
But same thing, come back from war. That word you used a second ago, responsibility, I think is really interesting about that generation.
Yeah, I think they felt that. I think they
'Cause
felt that.
His opinions, right, couldn't have helped his career.
No.
I mean, come on.
No, he would speak out about
Yeah.
against Vietnam and stuff like that. You know.
Prejudice, it's such a consistent message.
Oh yeah, it's in a lot of his work. And apparently, when he was in college, the town where he was going to college, there was only one barber and one grocery store that would serve black people. And if he had heard that you went to one of the other stores that didn't serve black people or got your hair cut at a barber that didn't serve black people, he would come and chew you a new one. Like when he was in college,
Really?
yeah. Like he would get really mad, livid. Yeah. Yeah.
What a fascinating guy.
Yeah. And his last interview that he gave, he talks about somebody sent him a pamphlet or something for some white supremacist group or something. And he's just like, I'm not a violent person, but I just want to go down there and shoot them all.
Yeah.
He really, it was a visceral thing with him.
Yeah.
It was a real thing. It wasn't fashion. It wasn't because it was cool. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a real thing that was deep inside of him for some reason.
To the point where he figures out, because he's so obviously a smart dude, I'm going to invent a show that allows me to actually talk about some stuff.
Yeah.
Again, the point, having a point.
Having a point. That's how you make a classic. How you make a hit, I don't know.
Right.
How do you make a classic? Have something to say. Just have something worthwhile to say and say it well.
Well, just like you said a minute ago, throw both without a cause.
Yeah. How do you make a classic? Have something to say.
Yep.
Right? These kids are not aliens. They're human beings. They're our kids. What do we do? How do we create this mess? Is really, as an adult, is what he was asking, I think.
Yeah, he was an amazing dude. I'm going to ask you about another guy that you're obsessed with.
Okay.
Obviously, you haven't gotten to meet. Talking about Billy Wilder.
I did try to meet Billy Wilder once.
You went to his office.
I went
right?
to his office with my friend Chris, and we sat there. And he used to go to his office every day. He was very old at the time. And he used to go to his office every day, Billy Wilder, but he didn't show up that day. He was slowing down. So he didn't show up. We waited and peeked through his mail slot, but we never saw him. We did talk to his neighbors. They were very nice. And they're like, oh, yeah, Billy comes in. But, he just wasn't there that day.
Yeah. What was it about Billy Wilder?
Well, I don't think anybody did the job of writing and directing as well as he did both those things. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You could point to a director, you could point to Michael Curtiz or
Ford or somebody. Yeah.
Right? But those people didn't write.
Yeah.
Billy Wilder was a storyteller all the way through.
Yeah.
And so he even said to his writing partners that we are directing here. Like, so you were also directing. We're directing on the page. So for him, it was all the same job.
Well, that's funny because I was reading your new show, and like I said, it was like, man, it's so clear. You're dictating how it's going to be shot without saying anything, right? So I can see you directing without no camera movements. None of that stuff's in your scripts,
Right.
But it's like you kind of are tying the hands of whoever. Right? So
Yeah.
if you're not directing it, whoever does is pretty much going to have to direct it the way you wrote it.
Right.
So that's interesting. So he said writing was directing also.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think he had a sense. He was just a storyteller. It happened to be on film, but he was a storyteller, and so he didn't see a distinction between the two jobs. And there's something about that comes across in his work. His work is unbelievably focused. It always knows what it's about.
Again, you come back to it about.
Yeah, what's it about? He never wasted anything, right? So like he said, there are no phony shots in my movies, meaning I didn't just do things to do them. They were all
Going back to what Bruce talked about and what Picasso, right?
Yeah.
All these guys.
Yeah. So he was not trying to be noticed. He was trying to tell the story. You'll notice if you watch Billy Wilder movies, there's always a gag that goes all the way through. Like in Double Indemnity, there's a guy who never has matches, right?
Yep.
Right. And it's like he never wastes anything. So everything comes back.
Yeah.
Everything, or one of the things I love about his sort of secondary characters that maybe don't have, they have a couple of lines. They're always fully realized human beings. So like there's a maid in Double Indemnity. I don't know how many lines she has, not very many. And the Walter Neff, the insurance guy, comes to the door, and he says, she says, "Oh, wait in this other room while I get the lady of the house," or whatever she says, and she says, "Just go in there," and then she says, "They keep the liquor locked up." Right, right.
Yeah.
And the way she says that, like, I got you. I
could see it.
I see who you are.
Uh-huh.
But she doesn't have a lot of lines. But she's a real person with a real perspective
Yep.
and point of view, and she only has just a few lines.
Yeah.
And he does that. He does stuff like that in A Foreign Affair. There's these two characters that come in to arrest this woman, and just their interaction with her. It's like these are real guys who I always think. Here's what I think when I write a character or when I see a character. If I can imagine their life off screen, then that's a fully realized character, right? Well, can I imagine that person having a beer when the movie's not happening?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Max from Sunset Boulevard.
Right. Yeah.
That dude is a fully formed character.
Yeah.
One of the best.
Yeah, he is.
Some of these movies, I feel like because you've seen their poster so many times, you go, yeah, I've seen that poster. It's like Sunset Boulevard is so good. Like the more you learn about it, the more you just want to, just walk away. Just walk away from it.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
It's very good. Yeah.
It's you just watch it. I remember what we were watching some movie at the house where we were like, we just would look at it, we look at each other and be like, oh my God, I don't even know how to, because it's so good. You're
Was it
like
Godfather?
I think we're watching Godfather.
We were watching Godfather.
And we'd be like, yeah, I don't know how he.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, and also his range, man.
Yeah, because he was a storyteller. He didn't I don't really understand, me, I don't understand genres, right? So I don't understand people who think in terms of genre.
Yeah.
That seems like a marketing thing, not a creative thing
Yeah.
to me, right? So Billy Wilder genre didn't mean anything to him either. I mean, he didn't make any westerns, but he could have.
Sure.
Right. But he has noir stuff, and he has Sabrina romantic comedy stuff, like The Apartment. Like, he's all over the place. Comedies, dramas. Like, none of it made any difference to him.
Yeah.
In fact, he said that if I show the movie and people laugh, I call it a comedy. Like, for him,
Of course he said that.
right? Because for him, it was like it's all the same job. Some things are a little bit more serious, and if you look at his serious stuff, there's jokes in it. You
Sure.
look at his jokey stuff that gets very serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Some Like It Hot doesn't have anything serious in it, but everything.
Some Like It Hot. Like, this is the same thing.
Yeah.
Some Like It Hot. Yeah, Some Like It. It doesn't get enough credit.
No, it's true.
Some Like It Hot is still so damn funny,
It's hilarious.
and it pays off.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, Some Like It Hot is another one of those where it's like, it might be one of those you haven't actually taken the time to watch because you're like, I've seen that poster. I want to. It's like, watch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did he teach you? Like, because you've got a couple of people kind of high up on your shelf, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is Billy up there?
He's up there because he not only was he good, but he was consistent over time. And that tells me, like Hitchcock, that tells me that he knew what he was doing, that it wasn't a mistake or a whim or a, the fluky thing, like, oh, the market was this and he happened to have the voice of the time or whatever.
Yeah.
No, he was writing, in the 30s, writing hit movies in the 30s.
Yeah.
And he was making good movies into the 60s. He knew what he was doing. And I like the idea of being able to get consistent results, right? That it's not a fluke.
Yeah.
It's not an accident. And that you can do it with it's proof that the craft can carry you, that the craft can give you longevity, that the craft won't let you down, right? And he's such a craftsperson.
Yeah.
He's it's funny because people talk about 3-act structure and they don't believe it or they don't think you should, whatever. Well, Billy Wilder talked about 3-act structure, right? He's the one who said if there's a problem in the 3rd act, it's probably a problem in the 1st act.
Right.
Right? So he thought about
You either listen to that and go, oh, or you look at it and they go like, nah, he's wrong. Okay. Well, if Billy's wrong,
yeah.
what does that mean?
Yeah. I don't pretend to be smarter than Billy Wilder. So if he said to do it, I'll just do that.
Right.
Anton Chekhov said the same. So it's like, look, these guys are smarter than me. I just listen to them. So I'm not sure why people don't do that. I think people have to spike a flag and feel smarter on their own. But
most shortcuts are not good.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a good shortcut.
Yeah.
Who said it? Oh, all right. Well, I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, consistent over time.
Yeah.
Classics.
Yep.
Hits and classics.
Yep.
Right? Hitchcock too, and they all have these rules these principles that they followed.
Yeah, I also liked the guts he had. You know what I mean? Like, you hear some of those stories about where he'd give somebody a piece of his mind, and you know what I mean? Like, I just like that he didn't take any shit. Like,
when he was doing Stalag 17, so Stalag 17 is a POW camp, right? Mm-hmm. So Americans in a prisoner of war camp in Germany, World War II. The movie was done in the 50s, but it's about World War II. And the Paramount, this was in the 50s. Billy Wilder had worked at Paramount since the 30s. So he's making this movie, and they said, we don't want these guys to be German, the bad guys, because that's a big market for us. So can you do something else? Can they be something? Can they be Polish? Can they be whatever? He said. And he said, maybe it was Polish, whatever it was.
Yeah.
They said they didn't want him to be German. And he said, I'm sorry, what? He said, well, we don't want him to be German. I don't think it was Polish. It was something else. And he said, because his family died at Auschwitz. Billy Wilder's family died at Auschwitz. Yeah. And he goes, how dare you? Right? How dare you tell me that I can't make these guys German?
Yeah.
And he left Paramount. He had a contract. I think he had to do 2 other movies with them, but he left. He's like, I'm not going to work with these people.
Yeah.
Like, he's a principled guy.
I love that
and
stuff.
Yeah. His family died at Auschwitz, and he's like, I'm not taking this.
Yeah. Good for him.
Yeah.
Think about the pressure he would have been under. Nope. He walks.
He walked.
A big theme, a lot of his films a lot of them seem to point towards pretty much like don't sell your soul. Right. In one way or another. And
the Apartment has that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that he lived that out for himself.
He did, yeah.
He
did. People
there's
said
that story, and I bet we can find it and link to it, of him going through the immigration office.
Oh, right, yes.
It is one of the most incredible stories. I remember the first time I saw him, it was an award show or something. He told the story, and I got choked up. We'll link to it. But talk about, we were this close to losing Billy Wilder before he even got started. Yeah. We'll link to it. It's an incredible guy. Incredible person. Yeah. And obviously his body of work speaks for itself.
Yeah, he was amazing. So I just think, pretty much anybody who studies this for any amount of time will circle around to Billy Wilder. I think you can't help it. I think he was just so good at it that you can't help it. Yeah. You have to get there. You have to, you know what I mean? It's like you can be a saxophone player and not look at John Coltrane, but eventually
yeah. Right? If you want to keep getting better.
Yeah. Eventually that's where you're going to go. You can't help it, right? There's going to be certain people, maybe in every field, right? Every craft where you're like, oh, you're going to study architecture. Sooner or later you're going to get to
Frank Lloyd Wright or something. Yeah, whoever.
Sullivan or whoever,
right.
Yeah.
You can't not.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. Some people are that good at the craft, or they've taken enough in from enough other people who were good at the craft. And found a way to utilize it and crystallize it in their own work. Yeah. Billy Wilder's idol was Ernst Lubitsch, right?
Right.
Right. I don't know who Ernst Lubitsch's idol was, right?
Okay, another one we're going to link to is him explaining why Lubitsch was so good.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's a great clip, too, because I love that Billy gives so much credit to him.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have, he's Billy Wilder, but he's like, no.
Yeah.
You want to know who's really good?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just always fun to go like, oh, this person's amazing. We'll now figure out who their hero was. And when Billy Wilder explains why he was so good, it's like, oh, my God. And you can see Billy's style all over that.
I wish there was more stuff of people talking about why they like the people they like. Like, there's an interesting thing because sometimes there's too much distance, right? So that if you don't know what to look for when you watch Charlie Chaplin, then you don't know what you're looking at, right? So somebody shouldn't just say to you, watch Charlie Chaplin. They should tell you why. Because when you're on the other end of history, when the stuff feels cliche because everybody's ripped it off or
Right.
whatever, you can't see it clearly.
Just like Picasso.
Right. So you have to find a way to see it clearly. And I think that people who are of an older generation, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, people will watch, somebody just told me they watched Tootsie. And they were like, oh, my wife didn't like Tootsie. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Now, Tootsie is so well written and so well constructed that every screenwriting book since it's come out has mentioned it. I even mentioned it, and I tried not to.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, I don't want to, everybody quotes Tootsie. I'm not going to. It's so well structured, and it's so well done that it's in every screenwriting book. And this woman's like, I don't like it. And I thought, there's a reason she doesn't like it, and I wonder if it's getting too old and it's getting harder. Time puts a layer of dust on things.
Right.
Right? The quality of film changes. The acting styles change. All these things change.
The way
right?
people talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Even gestures
Yeah.
right, change. People
Well, we were talking about Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah.
And how some folks in the office were like, it's hard for me to watch that. She's, the way she's treated at work. Right. And it's like, yeah, it was a different time period.
Right. And so that stuff can be a barrier between you and the gold that you would find there if you could get past it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it helps if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so I think that people, Spielberg talks about John Ford and how much he likes John Ford. If he talked more about why he liked John Ford.
Oh, my God, it'd be so great. I'd love to have him explain that.
That's what, you know what I mean? So the way Billy Wilder talks about Lubitsch, I want to hear why people are influenced by certain people. What is it that's so great about? Because, I'll listen, right? Maybe not everybody will, but I think that's gold. I remember when I first started reading comics and everybody talked about Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was, he was still doing some stuff, but he was really not the hippest style when I started reading, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't get it for a while. It took me a while to get Jack Kirby. But I thought it would be interesting if people, instead of saying Jack Kirby's the greatest, if the best artists who were influenced by him, people I could identify with because their style was closer to, said, this is why Jack Kirby's great.
Yeah, imagine if they took, I'm going to just take one drawing and I'm going to explain this.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing.
It would be amazing. And I don't know why, people don't do that. Like, I can't do it, but it'd be great if somebody did a book. It's like, this is why Jack Kirby's good. This is why so-and-so's good.
Right.
Right. And then broke it down.
Yeah.
All these different artists.
Just like
Glenn. Yeah.
Watch his eyes.
Yeah.
And then you watch his eyes and you go like, I would have never seen. When you said that Glenn said that, you told me that story, and I was like, I love Picasso. I got, whatever prints and stuff all over my house, and ever since college, because the feeling that he could get out of a painting was big. And I told you for our honeymoon that we actually went to Malaga, Spain, where he was born. But I had never seen his eyes like that.
Right.
As soon as you said, well, you know what Glenn says, look at his eyes. I watched him. I was like, son of a bitch. Yep. Yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't see it until somebody pointed at it.
Right.
Right? And I'm sure Jack Kirby's the same way, and or Billy Wilder's the same way, Rod Serling's the same way. So when you look at Billy, what's the thing that you would tell people, don't miss this?
Don't miss that he always knows where he's going. That was on his list of tips, because he's got a list of tips, right? And that was know where you're going. And there's something about knowing where you're going that makes your work so clean and precise. It's an arrow, again, slicing through the air with no friction. There's no friction in a Billy Wilder thing. It's all pointed in the same direction, and it's all aiming at a single target. And there's a cleanness. You know very quickly when you're watching a Billy Wilder film that you are in the hands of an expert. It doesn't take you long to know that. Sometimes I'll read a script for somebody. I don't do it as much as I used to, but sometimes I'll read a script for somebody and they'll say, it really kicks in at, page 20 or, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? First, one thing, you told me you probably started 20 pages too early. But when something's good, it's good fast. It's good quick. When you're sitting and you're watching E.T., how long does it take before you know it's
Yeah,
good?
sure, yeah.
When you're watching Jaws, how long does it take before you know it's
Yeah.
good? Right? It
The
takes,
Raiders,
Yeah.
whatever.
It takes you no time at all. When something's good, it's good from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you know.
Well, it's like a meal.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got sick through the first 2 courses, but if you stick with it, the diarrhea goes away. You're like, no, that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's something about it when you're in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing. It's clear early on. Finding Nemo is one of those, right? Like right
Yeah.
away, you're like, I'm watching something special here. You know it.
And right now I can hear voices out there and people saying, give us an example from this year.
Yeah. I wish I could.
Yep. Sure.
I wish I could. The problem, I don't like
I told
to
you
talk.
my favorite movie of the year was Spider-Man.
Sure.
And I'm sure that makes me sound like, I don't know, not an intellectual or whatever. But I was like, no, I mean, if everything I saw in the theater this year, Spider-Man moved me the most.
Yeah. I think, I don't like talking about contemporary stuff because people are emotionally attached to it.
Right.
Right. So they're like, but I love that. And so there's no talking to people but I love that, by the way, is not an argument.
Yeah.
But people will say that. Like, I'll go, these are the things that are wrong with this, but I like it. Well, okay.
Yeah.
That is not an argument. That doesn't work in court.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just laid out a case.
Yeah.
And you said, but I like it. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not an argument. And so because people have an emotional response, and that emotional response can come from anything, right? I like the colors.
The
do I
artwork
like
or
the
whatever.
actors?
Sure.
Do I like that kind of special effect? People will say, but I like that kind of movie, right? That kind of thing. Like, well, that's personal.
Yeah. But that's just different than being good.
Right. And so I tend not to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't like
No,
talk.
I can understand that.
Yeah, because people can't even hear me, you know. And also, I never understand the question. People ask me a couple times a week, name something recently that you liked. A couple times a week, and I don't understand what recently has to do with any of it.
Right.
Like, I'm just talking about good work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should turn it around. Name something from the 1930s that what's your favorite 1930s movie?
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
I can tell you mine. Right.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah. But it's not relevant, right? Like I think I said it before on the show, but film is a really interesting thing because it's the only art form that gets old. Right? Music is just music. Right?
Yeah, Beethoven's just Beethoven.
He's just Beethoven. It's like, oh, you listen to old music. No, I'm listening to Beethoven. Right? Billy Wilder's just Beethoven.
Yeah.
Right? It's Beethoven. It's not old, it's Beethoven.
Right.
It's not old, it's Shakespeare.
Same thing. Talk about focus.
Yeah.
You talked about Beethoven before. Focus.
Yeah.
Right.
Complete focus.
Billy Wilder. Focus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But so if people could get past the old, I guess comic books and film both get that.
Here's a wild one, okay? And let's end with this guy. And I don't think people might see this one coming because we've talked about a lot of people that I think maybe you would say are heavy or really important writers and filmmakers and whatever. And it's like, let's talk about Chuck Jones because I know that we love Chuck Jones.
Chuck Jones is great.
Yeah, so. Who was Chuck Jones?
Chuck Jones was an animation director at mostly at Warner Brothers, most of his career, I'd say, or the significant part of his career.
Yeah.
At Warner Brothers. An amazing director.
What would you know of
the original Grinch?
Yeah,
people would know, which was not at Warner Brothers, but yeah, the original Grinch. But Bugs Bunny, a lot of Bugs Bunnies. Roadrunner's his. Yeah. Pepe Le Pew does not age well. I'm just going to put that out there.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you take away from Chuck Jones?
Chuck Jones was precise. He was so precise that he could get a laugh out of nothing.
Man.
He could get a laugh out of a blink.
A half of an expression. Guy.
It was precision. He also had a really good sense of character, and he made observations about himself. Like when he talks about
Mark Anthony and Cleopatra.
Oh, the
You know, that one with Mark Anthony and Cleopatra, the cat and the dog.
oh yeah
What's the name of that one?
Feed the Kitty.
That it's so unbelievable when you watch that for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not just watch it, put your phone away, watch it.
Yeah.
Just actually watch it.
It's amazing to watch.
It's impossible to make, like, what he could do with the amount of time and budget they had,
Yeah,
the Termite Terrace folks, like, what he could do is kind of unbelievable.
it is unbelievable. It's amazing what he could do. They were so, and you know, it's hard to talk about Chuck Jones without talking about Michael Maltese, who wrote a lot of that stuff, and without talking about Maurice Noble, who was the layout guy and designer, who was amazing.
Yeah.
I would say that it's really Chuck Jones is Chuck Jones, but it's that.
But it's funny because when you watch those old cartoons, you can feel the difference.
Oh, there's a difference.
And you go like, Chuck, as soon as you see the three of them in it, you're like, this is going to be insane.
Right.
And it always was.
Yeah. They were amazing.
Same within the Twilight Zone. When you go like, oh, Rod wrote it, you know it's going to be good.
Yeah.
There's some that are, harder to follow and things like that. But as long as he's behind it, it's usually really good. Like when you had the three of them together, they were dynamite.
Yeah, it's amazing what they did. They were good.
So you would say focus?
Yeah, he was yeah, I would say precision, which is focus. I would say he was very precise and deliberate, right? So he and Maurice Noble were very deliberate in their choices. And so like they would make these choices like there's Wagner, right? So they do the Wagner thing, the parody they do What's Opera Doc?
Yeah.
Right? Which they were able to spend a little time and a little bit more money on because the Roadrunner, which was Chuck Jones, they could bang those out pretty easily. So they had a quota, like you have to put out this many films a year or whatever. So they would just bang out a bunch of Roadrunners because they were relatively easy for them to do, and then they could spend more time and money on What's Opera Doc, which is why it's so beautifully done. And the designs are beautiful, but they would make these choices. Like Wagner's famous, the saying, "It's not over till the fat lady sings," is from Wagner, and but Bugs Bunny was the lady, so he couldn't be overweight. So there's a big horse, right? And so they're making these choices. Like we still have to make the choice somehow to have that represented on screen, and it's those kinds of choices, and it's hilarious to watch.
So well structured too.
Yeah,
yeah, it pays off.
It really does. It's the colors are beautiful. It's really a beautiful piece. But
will you tell the story just so people understand how smart these folks are? Will you tell the story about the witch?
Sure. Well, so Maurice Noble. So there was a company called UPA, and UPA were a bunch of animators and designers who did. They were very famous for a cartoon called Gerald McBoing Boing, and they did Mr. Magoo, and there's a whole documentary on UPA if you want to find out about them. But Maurice Noble had in some ways a similar style, but I heard something where he said he didn't, or maybe I read it, I can't remember, it was years ago, where he was not that big a fan of UPA. Now, designers are like, but UPA is the greatest thing. But he said that he thought UPA just designed stuff that looked cool and didn't design for the film itself.
Yeah.
So he was always very specific about his designs. And if you look at his designs from cartoon to cartoon, they're very specific.
We have three of them in the office. They don't look like the same person did them.
Yeah. They were consistent within the world of that cartoon, but that cartoon had a certain world. So if you watch any of the cartoons, the Warner Brothers cartoons with the Witch Hazel, if you watch those and look at the backgrounds, because it was the witch's house, the backgrounds make no sense. He was designing specifically for that story. So you'll see weird things like there'll be a couch, but it'll be floating in the background, or there'll be a
fire's on the ground.
Yeah, the fire will be on the ground, the fireplace or whatever on the ground, like it'll kind of bend, and or the picture frame, like there's a picture hanging, and the wire goes up the wall and then up the ceiling. He does all these things because it's the witch's world and there's magic and nothing makes any sense. Now, you don't notice it.
No, and that I can attest to that. I remember you said that was like, well, look at the backgrounds. And I was like, what about them? I don't know how many times I'd seen those cartoons.
Yeah.
the same type of thing. Somebody points it out and you go, oh my God. It's so obvious and it's so clean. I'd never noticed it.
Yeah.
And it's so well done. And it just gives you, it really makes you take a step back and be like, man alive. Talk about craft. Talk about everything was motivated.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, I mean, this witch, nothing would make sense in her house. It's just like, and then when you see it and the way he was able to pull it off, again, going back to the time and money, they didn't have a ton of that.
Right.
It's not like they just got to do whatever they wanted.
Right.
Right. And then they, like you said a minute ago, where they'd be like, oh, well, let's bang these ones out so that we can really push this one forward. And they cared so much about these little cartoons that most people thought they're going to run and that's it.
Right. Yeah. They didn't know they were making classics.
No.
Right. I mean, there was really.
But they approached everything as though it would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which reminds me, that's August.
Yeah.
Don't make the best cartoon. Don't make a good enough cartoon to make the kids smile.
Right.
Make the best cartoon ever made.
Yeah. I think that's what they were trying. They were always pushing themselves to do a better job.
Going back, same thing. Going back to Glenn.
Yeah. Yeah. Push yourself. And also, it's important to know that these things weren't noticed. They were felt. That's important because a lot of times people do things to be noticed, right? Maurice Noble was not trying to be noticed. So you watch those cartoons and you never noticed the couch was floating and the fire was on the ground, right?
Nope.
You never noticed any of that stuff because it wasn't there to be noticed. And trusting that you can do something that is that outrageous too, that the couch is floating and the fire's on the ground and all that stuff, and that people won't notice, trusting that you'll go with the feeling of something and the audience will go along with you is a big thing.
Well, that's what Glenn was talking about with Little Mermaid.
Yeah. Yeah. I've learned a lot from that. Like, I will go to the emotional truth will beat everything.
Yep.
Right. So I do that all the time. I'm like, you know what? I can be a little abstract here and nobody will know it's abstract.
Yeah.
Right. Because Glenn's drawing the feeling.
Yep.
Right.
And that's why they shoot at Spielberg, which is crazy.
Yeah. Right.
But
he's going for the feeling.
Yeah, and it works, and it's great. And,
yeah. When it works, it's amazing.
Oh my God.
Sometimes you fly too close to the sun, but
sure.
But that's all right.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that over nothingness.
I will too.
Right.
I will too.
What would you? So you've had all these. You have almost these kind of like virtual kind of mentors or teachers,
people I haven't met,
like Chuck Jones and people like that. And then you have, folks like, August. And would you have any tips on, for instance, with August, you saw him from a balcony. You walked down and you talked to him.
Right.
You got really lucky because he's such a nice guy.
Right.
But do you have any suggestions of, how do other people find mentors? Like, again, going back to Bruce at the very beginning, a 13-year-old, what'd you do? You picked up the phone.
Right.
Right. Any sort of like tips or how to I don't know, find a mentor or how to make the most of their time if you ask them questions or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, sometimes people want mentors to do the work for them, and what I find is that they'll often meet you halfway. So sometimes people are like, you don't meet August Wilson having never written anything and say, hey, can you teach me about writing? Right? Because you're not serious yet.
Yeah.
Right? So get as good as you can get on your own. Learn everything you can learn. One of the reasons I impressed Bruce when I went there when I was 13 is I read incessantly about movies. I knew everything about movies that I could learn. I just absorbed anything I could. I watched every making of and behind the scenes thing. There was a show called That's Hollywood, all about behind the scenes. I never missed That's Hollywood. Anything I could get a hold of, I would watch. And this is before you could, there was, you just had to, it was on TV. You had to watch it then or it would be gone, and read books and anything. And
this is when you would do audio tapes, right?
Audio tape television shows to learn how they, were structured and all of that. So when I met Bruce, I knew some things. I came with some things. I think that mentors want to know that you're willing to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're not good people to meet when you're just getting started and have nothing. There's no reason to invest in that person. right, for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it could be a whim. I was thinking about writing, but I don't know. Nobody wants to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Enthusiasm matters, right? So if you're actually enthusiastic, then you will have. In fact, Bruce said that to me today. He goes, enthusiasm makes a big difference. That's more important than anything else. So I think if people see that, that matters. And part
Well,
of
that's
that,
what he did, that camera operator.
right? And that's what he was talking about. He said, well, she had enthusiasm, and that's the most important thing.
I've seen that.
Yeah,
Enthusiasm and hard work gets you so far.
yeah. And so people will help you. Right? People will help you, but you have to be out there doing it. You can't be thinking about doing it, considering doing it.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to, why would they waste their time?
Right.
Right? And then you're getting something that's coming too easily. Right? But if you've been struggling with something and you hit a wall and you meet that mentor, then they're going to be willing to help you more times than not.
Well, that's the old, when the student is ready, the master appears.
Yeah. That's
It's funny how that works.
It's totally true. And you know what? When you're not ready, that master will do you no good at all. That mentor does you no good at all if you're not ready.
Yeah.
You have to be at a certain point. Glenn told me,
You have to have humility. That's one of the things I've learned from all these folks that you've talked about.
yeah,
Right? The humility to go, I watched this Billy Wilder movie. I watched Sunset Boulevard. I didn't like it. What didn't I see? Not, that guy, what did I not see?
yeah, I find that a lot. Like people say, I saw that thing, I didn't like it. Yeah, you don't know enough to dismiss it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at it through your eyes. Try to see it through my eyes. If you think I have something to teach you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, if you don't, you think, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about,
Yeah.
then don't listen to a word I say. But if I have something to teach you and you think so, then you have to, that's what I always did. If somebody I admired said they liked something,
Yeah.
I wouldn't look at it through my eyes. I try and see it through their eyes.
Yeah.
What do they like about this?
Yeah.
What am I missing here?
Yep.
And not enough people do that. They think they're right. And that stops them from learning. Instead of going, what if I'm wrong here?
Well, and there's something when you go like, I don't really like Jack Kirby stuff. It's too simple. I like Alan Moore stuff. It's like, well, you know who Alan Moore likes, right?
Yeah.
You're right. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? It's
yeah.
like it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
Maybe I could take another look at
Right. Yeah.
something. Right.
Yeah. But I was going to say, Glenn said something to me once. He said that Frank and Ollie would say to him, they'd be teaching him and they'd go, Glenn, we have so much to teach you, but you're not ready yet. They wanted to show him things, but they knew he wasn't ready yet. And he would be like, oh, I'll write it down and I'll read it later. Like he was very excited about
Yeah.
it. But that's an important thing, that you are not always ready.
Yeah.
You're not always ready. So sometimes you're not far enough along for that mentor to make any difference in your life. Like, so you don't want to meet people too early in your development. If you meet them
Right.
too early, you're just too far apart.
Right.
And that's good to know. You
Yeah,
know?
totally.
It's a good thing to know. Maybe they're talking over my head, or I don't understand it yet. Like, you should know that about yourself, because we all have to go through that where it's like, oh, I don't understand what that person's talking about. Like, I remember learning about visual communication, and I remember somebody said something that crystallized it for me, and then I realized, oh, I don't know anything about this. And that just, it was like a clear slate. Like, oh, I got to learn all about this now. I see. I don't know. I only knew cool shots.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this person, it was some guy came to our school. He was like a graphic designer and was talking to us. And I was interested in film and all that stuff. And I was lucky enough that my brain connected things, right? Like dyslexics do. So like graphic design, that had something to do with, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, something to do with film. I can figure that.
Yeah. And so I think it was after school or something. I can't remember, but this guy came and spoke. And this must have been 1979. And I was a kid. And he goes, he was talking about the movie The Black Stallion. And he was talking about the visual storytelling in that movie. And he said, there's a scene in it, and it's actually a really well done sequence. And they're racing this horse. They're trying to get this horse to qualify for some big race, and they're trying to say this horse is really fast. And so they're trying to get this big muckety muck to come see this horse run. And so this car pulls up, and that's the big muckety muck. And it's nighttime. It's dark. You can only see, like, the only part of the track you can see is where the headlights illuminate the track. So you can see the horse, and you can see, but everything else is darkness. And so they know the guy's there, so they go, hey, well, let the horse go. And so they start the horse running, and they hit the stopwatch, or you're inside. It starts to rain, by the way. Also, at that moment, it's also raining. It starts to rain. And the guy inside, I think it's the guy inside, starts a stopwatch when the horse starts running. And the horse goes into the darkness. So the horse is just in the darkness. You don't know where it is in the track, right? Because it's just dark. Only this little piece is illuminated. And you keep cutting back to the watch. Tick, 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 tick,
So
tick, tick,
smart.
and people looking. But you never see the face of the dude, the muckety muck.
Yeah.
You only see the stopwatch and this. And so then the horse comes around. He hits the thing. Now, a bad storyteller thinks that timer matters, but it doesn't. I don't know how fast horses run.
Yeah.
I don't
sure.
know what a good time is, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't know what the guy expects or doesn't expect or whatever. I don't know, right? So that doesn't mean anything. Here's what happens. The guy stops the stopwatch. Remember, it's raining outside.
Yeah.
This guy opens the door to his car.
Yeah.
He's wearing an all-white suit. I think he even has white shoes. Puts his feet in the mud and gets his feet all muddy and his suit all muddy. And then you see his face, and he's like, oh, my God. And the guy was talking about how good that was, and I was like, I don't know anything about this. And it's like, I got to figure out visual storytelling. To put him in a white suit, to put him in the rain,
good,
to put him
man.
in the mud. Yeah.
Yeah, come on. Get
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but you understand, the Black Stallion's a kid's movie, Brian. I'm surprised you took something from that.
That movie's so beautifully shot.
God.
And
That's insane.
Yeah.
Try writing that shit. The funny thing is explaining it, you're like, oh, man, I can see it. That's so good. It's like, try sitting down and writing that.
you know who wrote it?
Who?
Melissa Matheson, who wrote E.T.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that does it for us.
Melissa Matheson was not a joke.
No kidding.
Yeah. She was great. I really wanted to meet her. She was kind of I really wanted to meet her.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good.
I read E.T. so many times. I read that script so many times. Yeah. I was very upset when she died. But yeah, she was amazing. But yeah, so I was like, okay, I gotta, like, it was great to hear that from that guy, because it was like it was a clean slate. I was like, I gotta learn about this. I don't know anything about it. All I knew was cool shots. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
This is from this angle, and
Which
this,
means
look
you
at
don't
this.
know anything.
Yeah.
I know that feeling exactly. Oh, but you could do this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, yeah, but who cares what you can do?
Right.
What should you do?
Yeah.
What needs to happen?
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing. And the funny thing is, it's actually really scary at the beginning when you have to throw out all your old bag of tricks.
Yeah.
You know, and start to go like, I can't bullshit my way through this anymore. It's too hard.
Well, you know, the sound designer, which I think it was Frank. There's a sound designer, and I'm blanking on his name, but he did all the sounds in Raging Bull. And the sounds in Raging Bull are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know. This talk about going for the emotional versus the logical, right?
Yeah.
So there are things, the sound design in Raging Bull is off the charts. And there are sounds that don't make sense logically that make perfect sense emotionally. So there's, it's a boxing movie, and there's like slow motion of the guy like moving in the ring, and there'll be the sounds of like wild animals like elephants and tigers and things, right? And it feels right, but it has nothing to do with what's happening in the scene. And the guy,
You don't notice it,
you don't notice it at all,
but you feel it.
but you feel it. And so the guy made a special way to make there's flash bulbs going off, pop, pop, and he made this very special sound, these pops, right? And he does these beautiful sound work and beautiful things. And then he destroys all of them after every movie so that he doesn't use the same trick twice.
So crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
But that's how you get good.
That's how you get good. He destroys them.
That's Glenn. That's right. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't like hands and feet scare me. I guess what I'm doing next is hands and feet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking about this stuff, Brian.
Yeah, thanks.
I've heard so many of these stories about all these people that either you met or you haven't. And there's usually these really fantastic little pieces that I hold on to. And so it's been really valuable for me. And I hope that this has been valuable for the folks that are listening. Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching You Are a Storyteller. If you have any questions or there's a storytelling topic you want us to cover, leave a comment below or email us at hello@believeagency.com.